Hello everyone. Welcome to Can We Do It? Zencaster. Basically, I stopped the recording on the second slide to go and get my graphics tablet, and then we had an issue with Zencaster and it didn't record the file properly. So, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go through the first two slides, again, and then you'll Evan will join us through the power of post-production, and then we'll continue the majority of the podcast that way. So welcome to Can We Do It? And this week we're looking at fixing the Vegas loop. So we briefly looked at this last episode, and I also released a highlight separately, and that seemed to get quite a few views. So, clearly it's a popular subject, and I'm happy to still talk about it. Like, I find this whole thing pretty hilarious. So, but yeah, basically, like, one of the key issues with it really is that it's not really going to hit its stated capacity goals. I think we do have a comparison of capacity later on, but it just falls far short of being able to move the amount of people it needs to, especially considering that the convention center, it's not quite like an events venue. It has as peaky sort of as peaky events, like, a big gig ends or something and everyone heads home straight after that. But, I'm sure there are still like sort of large talks and stuff that go on during these conventions that will also command quite a high peak capacity. So the first slide, which is obviously the least important, and I think Evan would totally agree with me on this one, is sort of safety. And actually recently it came out that what to do in the event of a fire or a vehicle breakdown is that drivers will now have to back out of the tunnel in order to let the passengers out. So that's not so great. Especially if you've got a queue of cars trying to back out the tunnel, especially during a fire when it's burning up all the oxygen. So that's not so great. It still seems like the tunnels are going to be too narrow to allow to open the doors and allow people to get away. There's no emergency exits. There's no emergency ventilation system to pump fresh air in, which is a massive thing in road tunnels. You have to make sure. There's no sort of emergency lighting system apart from just like the RGB strip lights. So yeah, it's not that safe in the event of a fire. And I think, with this one where there's less of a mile in between stops, then it might be slightly better. But yeah, I wouldn't want to be going on one of these systems. I mean, I probably wouldn't feel that safe riding this, especially if though, it was quite busy. It wasn't just like me on my own in one car going through it. But yeah, also, the lithium batteries can pose a fire hazard. I don't want to cast dispersions that they're any more risky than like petrol cars. But as you can see here, it's certainly a thing that happens. Ultimately, this is the same with any sort of form of fuel that you need to carry with you. You have to carry the amount of energy that you need to get the car so many miles, and that's the same with petrol, and that's the same with lithium ion batteries. And if they set on fire, that energy will be released as heat. So it's like ultimately when you're trying to carry an energy source on board, you're going to have to deal with the fact that that energy may also be released as a fire.
Yeah, sorry, we're back now. You were getting a tablet and we had to restart.
I should have just done that at the start. Oh well.
Yeah,
so
it's all good. Should we start again now, actually?
Let's. Okay. So this better work.
Yeah. Right. So basically, you were getting a tablet, so we had to stop for a bit, but we're back now. So
I had to plug some stuff in and out again. It was a bit annoying.
Anyway, the cars, what were you saying?
I'm thinking, so this is my proposal, right? So obviously we want the cars to take up, in the tunnel. That hasn't improved my drawing much, has it really?
Not really. It was kind of useless you doing all that, I have to say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We want the train to take, the car to take up as much
Yeah.
space in the tunnel as possible, to really sort of maximise the small amount of space that is available. And then I was thinking on the side, which is why I have this photo of a shopping centre,
Yeah.
is so we obviously make it longer, and then to increase the speed of sort of embarking and disembarking, we sort of put like sliding doors along the lengths of the car.
So you're describing trains, or
No, these are pods. These are pods.
Oh,
Transport
okay,
pods. I promise
okay.
you, these are pods.
yeah.
And then,
Well, I guess if it had wheels, it would be a bus.
it could be a bus. Yeah,
Yeah.
it might be a bus. I mean a pod. Sorry, a
yeah.
big. So we have that.
Hmm.
So yeah, this is sort of a good start because people can get on without necessarily having to get seated. Like this way, you have to climb directly into the seat. You have to climb down.
Yeah.
It takes a bit longer.
Last week I talked about how middle seats, no one wants to sit in
Yeah,
them.
no one wants to sit in that.
So yeah.
So
that's only like 2 seats.
with this, you could have, because the journeys are only short. On the inside, you could have. You could do, say just like a row of longitudinal seats, and then you could mostly just sort of put like places for people to hold on,
Yeah.
like just sort of grab handles near the doors, and then wheelchair users, if you put the station at the platform at the level, they can just roll straight on. So boom. That's so much quicker for loading onto the pods.
That's true. Even though I just realised you'd have to raise, because I think in the station pictures you've shown, it's all on one level, isn't it? So you'd probably have to raise the middle bit so people can go straight on.
Well, you could just raise the whole platform, I think.
Yeah.
You could raise it, I don't know, say a metre off the ground.
Okay, yeah.
That would be, quite useful. And then you could just have all of the stuff that you need to run it underneath, and then you just have like a big box on top. And it also improves, not only does this improve disabled access, but it also improves, if people have got luggage,
That's true.
if people have got other disabilities, people can get on and off very quickly if they can board at level. So it's really a fantastic thing for everyone to have. So I think this would be a good idea for any alteration Musk wants to make to the pods.
I don't know if Elon would ever do it, but maybe.
Yeah. So the guideway. So obviously maximizing the size of the cars. If we want to make the car be like. Sort of say that. Oh, sorry, my tablet's being a pain.
I just realised something though, Josh. The only thing is maximising the size would mean if there was any accidents, how would people be able to get out?
So that's why I said we should put a door on the front.
Oh, yeah.
And then we have the cab at the side of that, and then people can sort of get on and off.
Yeah.
But although this isn't the greatest solution, I think for the small diameter of the tunnels available, it's probably the best solution.
Yeah. Wait, actually, how big could you stand in those tunnels?
Yeah, so the tunnels are 12 feet in diameter.
And how high? Do you know?
Oh, that's just the diameter, so that would be about 12 feet.
Of course. Yeah, so I don't know why I thought that meant wide.
It's kind of all the same thing.
Yeah.
With it being a circle, but yeah.
Yeah. Wait, you say 12 feet? So yeah, you could stand in that easily.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, I think that the guideway system, first shown in the concept loop, would be good.
Yeah, that actually looked cool, and that's the annoying thing is you could see some interesting ideas originally that was like, oh, that would be cool, and then it kind of digressed.
But yeah,
suggesting
a guideway. So it kind of provided a bit of a bumpy ride, but I think that it wasn't a terrible idea. However, there's another type of guideway system that's been developed,
what is this
which provides a smoother ride, reduces friction, and is pretty low maintenance. Especially if we're talking about like sub 50 mile an hour speeds, which the loop is 30 miles an hour. And there's a system actually near to me.
Really? Whoa.
Which uses this system. I think they use sort of long metal beams and sort of special wheels. You can see a diagram of.
Yeah, this looks revolutionary to me, I have to say.
They're sort of like a conical shape, so you can see there's sort of a conical shape there, which keeps it sort of centered. And then, obviously, if the corner's very extreme or something happens, you have these sort of lip of metal around the edge of this wheel to sort of, for safety. But yeah, these things are very good, and because it's steel on steel, it has a very low amount of friction, so it's really pretty clever, really.
Well, I'm assuming like this new technology Elon probably hasn't heard of, so that's why he's using them.
That's true.
Yeah.
But yeah, using sort of these here to sort of hold this pod.
Yeah.
Where's my cursor? Got my cursor went up there. I'm going to change the colour so I can actually see it in comparison to the slide colour.
Oh wait, yeah.
All the colours are basically the same.
I'll just use black.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that would be quite useful. So it would keep the pod in line inside the tunnel, and I think that would be good.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about power.
What are these creatures that you're showing? I mean, I haven't seen them ever before, I have to say.
Yeah, so these are like different pod type vehicles that I've seen about.
Okay.
This is like a sort of separate power pod.
Yeah, so inferior to what Elon was trying to do, obviously.
Yeah, and then you can see kind of like these passenger pods here that is actually pulled by the power pod, which is quite interesting. But yeah, the current issue with sort of battery power is twofold, in that having all of that energy stored on the vehicle is a fire hazard, and also the vehicles need to stop to recharge, which increases the space that's required at stations, reduces the amount of time they can stay in service, and also another thing that I've just thought of is weight and cost. Is that obviously the batteries will add a lot of weight, they'll add more cost, and here are some photos of pods that use different systems of delivering power. So this one up here, which is probably the preferred option, uses a wire. So basically it's just like a transmission line carrying high voltage electricity, and then you have this sort of pod stick system that sticks to the sort of wire and pulls electricity off of it to run the motors. So it removes the needs for batteries altogether. And essentially, as long as your supply of power keeps coming, the train can just run. The pods can just run forever. So yeah.
Wait, the only thing I would just think of with that one is if there's a limited amount of space in the tunnel, that would take up quite a bit, I'm guessing. Yeah,
so this is why I'm proposing a system like this is less ideal, because because it's on the ground, so you have an extra rail. So you can see here there's like these extra rails that pull. So this is actually London's pod system here.
The famous London pod system.
Yeah, and they actually use two extra rails as well as the two rails they run on.
Yeah.
And they deliver. That one's got 440 volts
positive charge, and that one's got 440 volts negative charge, so delivers like 900 volts. But most places just have a single rail delivering DC current, and then they'll just use another of the running rails to return the current. So yeah, these things can deliver a fair amount of power. You can see here it's sparking a little bit, but it's generally, as long as you make sure that you don't drop like tons of trash and everything on the tracks, it doesn't really cause any problems. So obviously it's a bit of a danger if someone gets on the tracks, but people just shouldn't really. Well, people aren't really going to be able to get on the road in the tunnels anyway. So that's
and also, sorry, if you weren't getting hit by, if you were on the track or not the road, I guess, in Elon's tunnels, like if you were in the tunnel itself, there's not like any space for you to get out of the way, I'm presuming, from what you were saying about the doors.
Yeah, no.
So even if you were on the road or the tracks or whatever, you'd get hit. So the only place where it could be a danger is maybe like in the stations.
Which is why they could use, I don't know if you've seen like platform screen doors.
No, I don't think I have actually. Well, what are they?
So it's basically, if you just think of it like almost a lift system where you have a second set of doors that keep all the passengers out of sort of, I guess, where the lift's coming. Because when the lift doors open, it opens the set of doors on the lift and the set of doors outside the lift at the same time.
That's quite cool. I'm actually surprised I haven't seen that in more places. Because that makes a lot of sense.
They have it on the tube as well, actually. In some places, they have it in the newer stations. And basically, there's just like a huge sort of glass panel with like doors on it, and you see the train pull in behind, and then they open and let people on. So yeah, it's basically a great way of sort of safety-wise, you turn it into a horizontal version of a lift in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
It reduces the chances of accidents massively, and also if there's heat inside the tunnels, you could sort of keep the platform air conditioned separately, or if it's an overground platform, you can keep the station also sort of isolated from weather.
Because that is one thing I find with the underground sometimes. I mean, I'm not in London, so I haven't gone there that much, and especially not recently.
Yeah.
But like, I remember it always being very kind of hot, or kind of like
it's very hot.
Way down there.
I think the deep level lines have, because they've got quite limited space in the tunnels, they don't really have any room for air conditioning. And air conditioning, sort of trying to squeeze it all into like the stations and stuff, is quite a challenge. So basically over the years, if the trains have run for like 70 or 80 years, they've just slowly been heating up the ground around them.
Yeah. Oh.
So now the heat just gets worse every year.
Oh, I didn't know about. Oh,
because it just keeps heating the ground. Yeah.
Would there be like a point where will it just keep on happening, or will there be a point where it'll kind of just be hot enough? I wonder. Yeah,
I reckon it would probably stabilize at some point. Yeah. But probably not at a comfortable temperature.
Oh.
So yeah, I think considering the space in the tunnels, the powered rail system would be suitable.
Yeah.
But I want to go on to the next slide, which is drivers. So the guide rails, as you can see, another sort of pod system with these guide rails, negates the need for sort of any control over steering. And what the guide rails allow us to do is hook multiple pods together, which into sort of a connected pod convoy.
Yeah, right.
But instead of getting rid of sort of the need, this gets rid of the needs to actually sort of do like complex technology stuff to maintain the distance, because you just mechanically attach the pods to each other.
That's true. This is also revolutionary, I have to say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, that massively increases capacity, but also reduces the number of drivers needed in the system, which is obviously a current issue. with it. But also safety-wise, you can imagine that because these can carry so many people, you'd only have to have one in each tunnel at a time. So if you needed to evacuate or if something went wrong, that would reduce the risk massively for that as well.
Yeah.
Well,
wait, to do kind of a drive, I just suddenly thought this, and this might be a really stupid thought.
Go for it.
How much space on the roads were there for the drivers? Because and are they like kind of straight bits of road, or is there curves and stuff?
There's curves in them as well, so
because
I guess you'd be
driving, I don't know, with like walls on either side of you. Driving, I don't know how to drive yet personally. I am like in learning, but if you like, let's say, slightly touch the steering wheel and went off to the side, would anything go wrong there?
I feel like you'd probably just scrape the car.
Yeah.
But I mean,
it probably wouldn't be terrible, but
so it's not.
I was wondering because if it was a small amount of like road space, then
I wouldn't want to drive any faster than 30 in one of those. Though.
Yeah, exactly.
I just think 30 is probably pushing it. I probably want to do 20.
Yeah.
But obviously with these guide rails, there's a much lesser chance of you know, because you lay out this sort of route once, then you just drive the pod through it very slowly to check that it doesn't touch anything. And then once you've evaluated that is indeed the case, basically every other pod after it is guaranteed to run through smoothly and without fault.
Exactly. By the way, I might actually now start to call trains pods, I think. I don't know.
Yeah, smart transport pods, because
exactly.
Hyperpods. Yeah.
It makes it sound way more futuristic and fun than train, I have to say.
But yeah, so there's actually vehicles already set up for this. They, fit in tunnels with a diameter less than 12 feet. They have doors on the front and back for emergency egress. They take power from a separate rail and maximise their volume to the extent the tunnels will allow. And these are...
pods.
London Tube trains.
London Tube pods.
Yes. London Tube pods. I'm going to have to erase this ink that I put on the thing. And these... Basically, the hilarious thing is the tunnels that Musk has built are the same size as the deep level tunnels.
Really?
In London. And yeah. So these would actually fit perfectly in the tunnels that Musk has built.
That's so weird.
So, yeah, I mean, basically, he's just recreated tunneling technology from like 100 years ago.
That's the thing. I don't know if I mentioned this much, but I don't know. It feels like he was trying more to be different than to do something good. Does that make sense? Yeah. Because I do feel like it's better to improve on current technology rather than try and do something completely different, if that makes sense.
Yeah, there's definitely an obsession with being revolutionary.
Yeah.
And I think, obviously, I think that I've also got some bits to touch on that in a bit, but I think that, there sort of is an issue where people want something that entirely revolutionizes transportation rather than something that just makes the current technology better.
Because I have to say, like, I get the appeal of the idea of the Vegas Loop.
Yeah.
Because the idea that you get to go down and you get to go in a Tesla and drive, have your driver drive you through the tunnels and everything. I don't know, and it's different and it's its own thing. There is an appeal there.
Yeah.
But it's not, from what I can tell anyway, from what we've been talking about, it's just not as useful as a train.
And I think that a lot of Americans don't really understand public transport in that, even in Britain, even in the sort of most car-dependent places, most people have been to, London or Manchester or, I don't know, sort of a city that has transportation, or they've used a train to go long distance, or even if they rarely ever do that, they've done it before, and they kind of understand to an extent, that it can be useful and that it can actually be quite good. But I think in the sort of American public consciousness, they've had it drilled into them so much that cars are the only way to do things, that I don't think they can seem to imagine just building a train.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we're not American, so we don't know. Maybe if anyone is, they could say. But from what I've heard, it's kind of things are very spread out. So the only way to get around, or the idea is the only way to get around is by car a lot of the time.
I'm gonna say I think that's
not
untrue.
True. Yeah, no.
America was kind of built on the train. Like, for a lot of its history, America was basically entirely built by rail. And if you go to cities, if you go to places like, obviously New York and Chicago are massive. They have like big subway systems. But a lot of cities, you'll notice sort of communities that feel fairly European in a lot of ways. And they were the sort of early streetcar suburbs where they would just have trams run through, like, every couple of blocks they would have a tram.
Oh, yeah, because isn't there the like San Francisco trams?
San Francisco is one of those cities that's very much like a representation of the streetcar suburb style of development. And that's actually why LA is so spread out. Was a lot because of that. So yeah, it's interesting to think.
I was more thinking when I said that, like
intercity.
Well, not intercity. Well, more like rural towns. And stuff.
Yeah, I think that when they say a lot of people live in suburban areas. So people live in areas that are basically are part of the city, but try and create a sort of rural environment, but fail miserably at it. Like, in that they are still a built-up urban area, but you also can't get anywhere. It's like the worst of both worlds. But I also wanted to touch on another aspect, which is I had that. Oh, that would have been fun.
That was a really cool animation.
I wanted to touch on automation. So, we've already reduced the number of drivers required by a significant amount. But, say we want to go further and go full autonomous vehicles like Musk promised us the loop would be.
Yeah, that would have been even more appealing. That would have been another thing that would be like, oh, it's not as good as trains, obviously, but it's like, it's different.
It's self-driving.
Yeah,
like a train. Although, I'm being a bit sarcastic there, but I sort of want to talk about self-driving trains. So it currently seems that dreams of autonomous vehicles are sort of banking on completely separating them from all of the traffic, whether that's people driving their own cars or pedestrians, cyclists, that kind of thing. They want to separate them from traffic in a fully isolated system, such as the Vegas loop. And while we wait for the sort of driverless technology to arrive, I think it might be worth looking at some systems already on the market for making our pod trains move driverlessly. Because if you think about it, a rail line is essentially already a completely sort of dedicated right-of-way with very few interactions with other traffic.
It makes sense in a way, now you've said it, that it could be autonomous.
Yeah.
Even though there's a bit of me that feels quite sad if it did end up like that. Because the idea that, I don't know, being a train driver sounds quite interesting. But it makes sense if it did lead to that.
So do you want to guess when the first automated train, or train that was capable, it still had a driver, but they basically press start, like they basically press start or stop. before say press start when they want to leave a station, and then it drives itself to the next station automatically, and then they press they open the doors, and then they close the doors and press start again, and it drives to the next station.
I'll say it was 1980.
Earlier than that.
Earlier than 19... Oh, okay.
It was the Victoria Line in London, opening in 1968.
Whoa.
I'm going to see if I actually have another... Yeah. So yeah, it's fairly rudimentary for today. But there wasn't even, from what I can tell, I don't even know there was any digital processing in the system at all. It was essentially just a giant box of relays, switches, and sort of just electronics.
Yeah.
And just sort of, physical sort of levers that would move and stuff to sort of align stuff. So yeah. So, they still had drivers to monitor the trains, to open and close doors at stations, and a lot of systems run like that. The advantage being that, the trains can sort of very accurately control themselves. Sometimes they can, instead of sort of having fixed signals, they'll be able to follow at a set distance behind another train.
Yeah. Also, I was just thinking, there's in general, there's less factors with autonomous trains.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, they are quite a solid technology, and one that's increasingly well established. So these systems have progressed over the years. The first fully driverless trains, so where no drivers required, they drive themselves. The first one was the Port Island Line in Japan, which opened in 1981.
Okay, so that was a year after my prediction.
Yeah, a first completely, unattended.
That was what I was actually going for.
Yeah,
it wasn't.
Some of the systems still require an attendant to be on board just to make sure everything's running okay, but don't require, maybe they want doors opening or closing. A lot of them can just sort of open and close the doors themselves and just run completely without sort of, just with staff milling around, making sure that everything's sort of nominal.
That's good, because people need jobs at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So even if it's milling around, they can get...
Yeah, sometimes they'll go on one train or another. Obviously, the longer gap you have between stations, you probably want someone on the train just to make sure that, if there's an emergency, something to help people evacuate, which is sort of what the DLR does. But yeah, then there was others in Canada. This system is the Scarborough RT, which was a precursor to the Canada SkyTrain.
Oh. Wait, so is that the one in the picture you've got there? Or...
Yeah, this is in Toronto. So in sort of Scarborough in Toronto. This is a fairly short line, but this is basically built on the same tech that did the early SkyTrains.
Have you been on it? Because you went to Toronto a year or two ago.
I haven't been on the Scarborough RT, but I want to go. If I go to Toronto again, I'm definitely doing this. Or if I go to Vancouver, I want to ride the SkyTrain because that's cool. Did you ride the SkyTrain?
I've been to Vancouver, but I didn't go on the SkyTrain actually.
Oh.
I'm sorry. I did go on I forgot what they were called, but the boats.
Oh yeah, the boats. That's cool.
That was cool. But...
I think the driverless trains I've been on probably are the Victoria Line in London, but mostly DLR.
Okay.
And also the air train in New York. It's connects JFK with the subway, so that's another sort of advancement of this sort of system. So yeah, basically. Trains are already automated, and they have been for 40 years.
Yeah.
Or 50 years.
They're not cars, Josh, so no one cares.
Yeah. But it's if your autonomous car is going to have to be on an entirely dedicated right-of-way, with no other interactions with anything other than other autonomous cars, it's no better than a train that was built somewhat probably with limited to no digital technology 40 years ago.
Yeah, would that also mean that they have to build new roads? Because there's not like space.
Yeah.
Really to build new roads, or I don't know.
And building a dedicated right of way is incredibly expensive. So if you're going to spend all of that money, you might as well move the maximum amount of people possible.
Yeah, so I'm thinking about the UK here because, like, I don't know, we don't have like a ton of land in general to just build completely new roads everywhere.
And roads take up a lot of space. I guess that's the idea with the tunnels, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Tunneling isn't going to be cheap, and I don't see how Musk is going to suddenly make it so that you can just, I don't know, drive, build 30 tunnels through central London because, the difficulty isn't just the tunneling, it's making sure that you don't hit things.
Yeah, wait, how environmentally friendly is tunneling in general?
Probably not much more of an impact than other forms of construction.
Yeah, I was just wondering because, like with Musk, I read recently. This is like what I know about him. But recently he was like, was it with Doge or Bitcoin? He was like, oh, you need to like have a more environmentally friendly way of doing it. But then if he's doing these like construction projects that are like, I don't know, if you like had mass tunneling everywhere, I don't know.
Think that
I might be wrong with all this.
It wouldn't be very efficient. But I don't think the environmental impact would be significantly worse than anything else that we do.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I'm probably wrong.
It's not. I don't think that it's... The worry is, though, is obviously you've got to monitor buildings and structures above where you're tunneling to make sure that you aren't just going to cause them to fall into the ground.
Yeah.
Or, collapse the ground around them or move them too much and destabilize them. So I'm sure a lot of cost for, tunneling projects in London, for example, will have to place sensors on all the buildings that they're going under to make sure that they don't move beyond like a tolerable amount.
Okay.
And you obviously have to go past, sewers, other transport lines underground, electrical cables, phone lines, secret bases.
Yeah.
So I guess we've resolved the issues of Las Vegas Loop, which is to install one of the 1968 Victoria Line trains in it.
Yeah, it's the only solution, obviously.
Yeah, which is probably the only sensible solution. Or you just put travelators in it, but yeah.
And to be honest, if they like went with like old-timey trains as well, like that would be very appealing for people. Cause, I was just talking about the appeal of like going in a Tesla in tunnels and everything with your own driver. Like, if they did literally install like 1960s like underground trains, that would be pretty cool.
I think a lot of people would ride that. I think a lot of people would find that cool. Yeah, that would be cool. Just look, okay, if you're like Musk, just hit up like TfL. They'll probably have some trains lying around that they'll happily give you. Actually, there are trains lying around that they'll give you because there's a company called Viva Rail who nicked a load of underground stock. I don't know whether it's subsurface stock, so it might be too big, but I'm sure you can hit up those guys and get up a solution going. So, just hit me up. I'll hook you up. I'll find people who can get you a tube train.
Josh will hook you up.
Josh will hook you up with a tube train.
He's got contacts.
I'll find people. Or you could just take there's 100-year-old ones. They've just retired off the Island Line and the Isle of Wight.
Really? Oh.
You could just nick them. So I want to do sort of looking at changes we might want to make to future designs based on the lessons that we've learned from the Las Vegas Loop. So let's look at reducing costs, because obviously costs is a big factor.
Yeah.
So if it was true, the $1 billion a mile figure for subways and metros would make the $10 million per mile loop look like a bargain. However, $10 million is just for a tunnel in a single direction, so immediately we have to make that $20 million to match the bidirectionality of most subway systems, especially the ones I think Musk is trying to compare to. However, Las Vegas Loop cost $52.5 million for the 1 mile long system, and we don't know if the Boring Company is breaking even on that. So my guess is probably not, especially when you consider whole life costs. So, farebox recovery, maintenance, all of this stuff, long term. And, obviously cost is a massive factor. And while the tunneling can probably be done for $20 million a mile, it just goes up depending on ground conditions, underground structures, services that need to be relocated or avoided. So if you've got a sewer in the middle of your tunnel, you're going to have to move it. If you've got electrical cables in the middle of your tunnel, you're going to have to move it.
I thought you'd just be able to drive through it.
So you either have to take the tunnel a different way or you have to move it.
Yeah.
So that's going to cost money. And there are other things like stations, air vents, fire escapes that adds the cost of building underground. And Musk doesn't really seem to have looked at any of these.
Yeah, I'm guessing the thing is you can reduce costs, but there's a point where, it's not worth it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, you're cutting so much stuff that the system becomes as useless as the Vegas Loop.
Yeah, exactly. There's a reason why things cost money at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And it's kind of, I'm guessing, if you looked at it as more as investment.
Yeah, you've got to see it as an investment rather than just like a onerous cost. Like a mortgage. It's like a mortgage, not just like a credit card,
Yeah.
Like you're trying to sort of save up for something that, an asset which has value long term. But yeah, if the costs go up, that kind of eats into the just build more tunnels idea. And if we want to reduce the number of tunnels required, building something closer to a subway system is the likely outcome.
Yeah.
So why do subway systems become so expensive? And this is sort of just what I want to briefly talk about, is that cost inflation can be a bit of a complex topic. There are a lot of factors involved, but technologies aren't generally a sort of massive factor, especially if they're well-established technologies. But generally, things that cause cost inflation are bad planning by politicians, which is just sort of like boom or bust cycles. So they'll suddenly decide they want to build a load of stuff, and then the price goes up because, obviously there isn't a supply chain in place, there isn't people who are qualified to do it. So the cost of it just kind of rises because everything becomes a headache. And they go, oh no, it's cost too much, I'm going to cancel it.
This is just a personal thing. And I haven't looked too much into that, but that kind of reminds me of here in Bristol, there's a subway plan going or something, but they've spent like a year, I think, trying to plan and loads of money into the planning, and it doesn't look like it's going to happen.
Yeah, and I think
it was more like we're going to say this thing from the sounds of things to get people excited, rather than it be a genuine kind of thing. I mean, I don't know enough about it. Maybe people might.
No, that's exactly the issue. Is that when you look at building these systems, you have to consider that these things are a long-term thing.
Yeah.
Like, you're not going to get a metro system built in like a 5-year term.
Yeah, exactly. But a load of politicians are like, this is going to be my thing that will get votes.
Yeah, they like doing ribbon cutting.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, the sort of boom and bust issue in the UK. So when it came to sort of electrification or upgrades to our rail network, it's estimated that this boom bust system is adding a third onto costs. So increasing costs by 30%. So if you've got a project that costs 100 million, 133 million. So you can see that's just a massive amount of money already. Then we've also got bad contracts and negotiation. So these include things like fines for delays from contractors, or offboarding risk to contractors, which seem like a great way. But this is also one of the major causes of inflation on HS2, for example, because the government's basically tried to offboard all the risk to its contractors. So, things go wrong during construction, right?
Yeah, obviously.
It's hard to sort of predict every single problem you're going to come into. So you come up with an estimate for a cost, and sometimes it just takes longer to complete something because that's just the nature of the beast, right? Obviously, the longer it goes on for, the more time you need to pay people for, the more you need to lease equipment, that increases costs. So, a lot of the time the government just has to foot the bill. So, projects can just be expected to probably run, 10 or 20% over budget is pretty common.
Yeah.
But what the government's trying to do with HS2 is it's saying to the contractors, here's the contract, we're going to give you this amount of money, and you have to deliver it on that amount of money. And we're not going to give you any more, and if you don't give it, we'll punish you. So the contractors have just gone, right, let's just add 50% to all of our quotes. Because, we don't want to, have to foot. So it's like, we're just going to add extra money to compensate for the amount of risk that we're taking on with it.
Yeah.
So it's just pushed costs up anyway.
Yeah. But do you think they'll end up spending more money than they would have if they just spent it each time then?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Because the government, essentially, because they have access to the money printer, they can very much afford to take on risk.
Yeah.
There isn't really... However, if you're a contractor, this project could literally kill your company if it goes wrong. And you don't have any support from whoever's financing it. So,
especially with HS2, because there is a lot of risks involved with it, I feel. And there's the normal stuff, but then environmental kind of things where people try and halt the construction because they want to stop HS2. That's another factor that I'm guessing usually with construction wouldn't be a problem. But that would waste a day of constructing.
Waste a day of everyone's time.
Yeah.
And it would be cheaper if the government just foot the bill for that instead of trying to get the contractors to. But I heard Go Transit in Toronto, or sort of the company that runs it, they're trying to instead give bonuses to contractors for delivering things on time. And they found that overall that generally increases the whether they deliver stuff on time or not, and it also just overall decreases costs.
That's quite interesting. So by spending more at the end, it probably will mean less money.
Probably
overall.
Save more, yeah.
Yeah.
So, and another thing which causes issues is just stuff like non-standard design. Building stations, bridges, viaducts to different types of designs increases complexity and therefore cost. Looking at sort of...
Sorry, to do with that, I'm guessing, with the London Underground, for example, initially it would have been a lot harder and a lot more expensive. Well, not expensive, but to stop constructing stuff. But I'm guessing now, if they wanted to do a new line, they kind of have an idea of what they're doing.
Yeah, they have the sort of technology laid down. And I think this is something that, talking about sort of resolving it, is that, these issues are mostly political. A result of politicians not really understanding or really having appetite for public transport. And it's transportation and infrastructure more widely has to be planned long term. You want to be building it more like a moving production line rather than seeing it as a load of distinct projects, because if you're sort of using a production line, you can reuse, equipment, supply chains and skills, so that reduces costs because you can sort of have like a production line of that digger that went and dig out that thing can then move on to the next project when it's done with that. Like, you know, you can sort of reduce costs that way. If you build sort of less but constantly instead of trying to just build a load of stuff in like a year.
That makes sense.
So, you know, you sort of have to plan 20 years ahead with these things, which unfortunately a lot of politicians just don't want to do because they could lose, you know, to another party. You know, they can't cut ribbons by the time that the project's actually finished. And
they won't be the ones doing it. It's a bit like the whole Boris Bikes thing.
Where it was actually someone else's idea, and then he cut the ribbon on it.
Exactly. People don't like their ideas like being ribbon cut by someone else.
Yeah.
So why bother, even if it is good for people?
And it's like, stop relying on hopes of future technology to resolve all your problems, because it probably won't. Most advances are iterative, making small improvements to existing technologies to make the experience better. And standardization, which is one of the good points made by TBC, the boring company, which is to standardize the size of like tunnel boring machines, tunnels, and sort of that stuff. That makes sense.
Yeah.
That's the one thing I'll give. But Spain is kind of the master at infrastructure this way, because they build high-speed rail for the same price per kilometre as China.
Oh, wait, and China's really cheap with stuff like that, I'm guessing.
Yeah. Like, obviously China's built a massive network, but Spain has built their network for the same price per kilometre, very similar to China.
Yeah, because, I don't know if it was high-speed rail or something else, but I feel I saw a video about it, like, talking about high-speed rail in China. And it was like, it's cheap, but it's because they're like underpaying people or something.
It's a variety of reasons. I think ultimately it's not like dramatically cheaper than what any other country can do. You know, Spain's a great example of that. But the government has an appetite for it and it's willing to invest in it. Which is not something that many Western countries seem to want to do, or it just seems completely politically unpalatable. So, you know, with Spain as well, they've done a lot of long-term network planning. Like, they know what their network's they want their network to look like in 20 or 30 years, which means they can plan ahead and, you know, put things in place when they want to start constructing something. So, you know, it just hits the ground. And, you know, if someone's got experience from digging up dirt on one line, they'll know how to dig up dirt on another line. Like, you know, there's no need to rebuild those skills or relearn those lessons. Like, people can say, oh, so, you know, if you press this button on the TBM, that actually makes it go a little bit quicker. Or if you do this, or, you know, if you do that, like, people can sort of pass the skills down as well. Whereas a lot of the reason why a lot of projects have been expensive in sort of the Anglosphere, especially, is because people have just kind of forgotten, like, those lessons have been lost to time.
Okay. Yeah.
You know, people have basically been relearning the same things that we've relearned the first time we built the railways. Except this time, everyone kicks up a massive fuss on it. So yeah, improving the tunnels. So this image is actually a technique you can use to reduce the cost of tunneling, which is basically you just dig up the entire street.
Oh.
Place your like tunnels in it, almost like a bridge, and then just build the street on top of it again. Which is obviously very disruptive and not suitable for any location.
Yeah.
But if you want to build stations, which are one of the major cost parts of it, because, you know, they're not the standard shape that the rest of the tunnel is, you sort of have it so your tunnels will raise up a little bit. You have your station be cut and cover, and then you pull down again.
Oh, okay.
And additionally, this is also very efficient because the train gains speed rolling out of the station and then it slowly reduces it. So by the time it gets back to the other end, it doesn't really have to do as much accelerating or braking.
Yeah.
But this also reduced costs because you can build the bulky station part near the surface.
One thing I was just wondering though is if this was brought over to the Las Vegas loop.
Yeah.
Isn't it? I don't know much about it, so correct me, probably. But you said it was like a convention center.
Yeah.
So some of it underneath the actual center, like the building.
I think so. I think they built a lot of it probably in stuff like car parks and stuff.
Okay.
Which I think is a great idea because, you can dig up sort of a car park with relatively little disruption to, especially if it's in a city or something.
Yeah.
It's not really going to make that much of a difference. So, yeah, just place your station there, like dig it up, build the station in it, and then just kind of create just like a structure over the top that you can then use to develop on.
Yeah. So I was just thinking, like, if it was inside a building, that would be harder to dig up the inside.
Yeah, no, that's definitely.
But yeah.
But generally, very few projects do that.
Yeah, obviously. Yeah.
I don't even think Crossrail. They've sort of done a lot of deep level tunneling, but that's because it's not very. Yeah, there's not much space to just do that in London. Although they have done that to an extent. But yeah, I'd also say making the tunnels bigger would leave more space if you wanted to have overhead electrification, if you wanted to have space for evacuation pathways, and room to install ventilation so breathable air can be piped in the event of a fire. Plus, you could increase the size of the vehicles so you can fit even more seats and have more room for people to move around, which increases capacity and reduces dwell times. And also, cheaper systems. Say you don't want to build an entire tunnel. A lot of public transport systems can operate very efficiently given dedicated corridors. These can be as simple as painted lines on the street and end up carrying more passengers than traffic lanes shared with private vehicles, including the people in those private vehicles. On the left, we have a surface rail-based pod train. That can run on the street with other traffic and be built pretty cheaply. And this probably carries more people than the loop, probably travels faster than the loop overall, and probably costs exactly the same.
Yeah, I mean, it's longer than the loop, so...
Yeah.
Well, like, not the loop itself, but I mean, like, the pods are longer, so...
Yeah.
I can't even see the end of that pod.
Yeah, there's like a pod, and then another pod, and then another pod, and then... It's like a big flexible pod. And then this is like a bi-level pod that runs on a sort of guideway. Very similar to the one proposed for the tunnel.
Yeah.
You can have like flexi pods that can sort of run articulated pods. But yeah, ironically, these systems are capable of carrying more people than the loop.
Yeah, even though I have to say I'm annoyed that you've gone for a first bus.
Right, yeah. Well, this is in Manchester, so soon Burnham's going to take it all over anyway.
Cool.
Yeah, nationalised.
Yeah, I wish that would happen down here at some point. The buses are just terrible. I'm going to
it's
continually complain about buses in Bristol, but.
We just have the trams, so that's kind of like our system of getting past. I mean rail-based pod vehicles.
Yeah.
That's our way of sort of avoiding the bus system, as you can just use the tram or the other heavy rail-based pod system is called the train. But yeah. So the Boring Company will be able to carry about 400 passengers per hour per direction. A bog standard like bus lane can carry 2,000 to 3,000.
Okay.
And a light rail line, like the one in Manchester, can carry about 4,000 passengers an hour.
Really? Wow.
Fully grade separated heavy rail is capable of carrying tens of thousands of passengers an hour. So in just one direction on the Thames Link, it can carry 41,000 passengers in an hour.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Oh, I guess that's because of how often they come along.
they come along like every couple of minutes. The trains are like 12 carriages long.
I always forget that because I always think back home, like, I don't know, buses and everything would be like every half an hour, and now I would be like, oh, that's good. Or even every hour, actually, sometimes I think.
Yeah, back home it'd be like every hour. It'd be like if they gave us hourly service on a Sunday, it'd be like, oh joy, what do we do to deserve this? But yeah, placing these systems on the surface with signal priority and dedicated rights of way, it boosts capacity massively. And you can create fully grade separated things, not just with tunnels, but you can just use a mixture of bridges, viaducts, and tunnels. But you can use a variety of construction methods that deliver the most cost-effective system. So yeah, our final thoughts. So I just sort of want to read out
Wario like that.
I just want to read out Musk's
Elon
opinion on
Wario.
public transport, which he said I think he said in an interview is, I think public transport is painful.
No.
It sucks. Why do you want to get on something with a lot of other people that doesn't leave where you want it to leave, doesn't start where you want it to start, and doesn't end where you want it to end? And it doesn't go all the time. It's a pain in the ass, and that's why everyone doesn't like it. There's like a bunch of random strangers, one of whom might be a serial killer. Okay, great.
What?
And that's why people like individualized transport that goes where you want, when you want. That kind of turned a bit funny. But, I mean...
It was better than his, I have to say. Your accent there was... It was like I was in Italy right then.
But yeah, I mean...
It wasn't as good as Grimes's, though, I'm sorry to say. Grimes's was amazing. I didn't touch him in the other whatever.
Ah, you cheated on me.
Oh,
yeah,
God.
I mean, I know all the time when I get on the train, like, I get attacked by a serial killer.
Yeah, it happens all the time. I get the point he's trying to make.
Yeah.
But that is, like, I feel like public transport and, like, cars and everything, they're there for different reasons, but it doesn't invalidate it.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It's like, I mean, at the end of the day, if you want to drive your car, fine. But you can't complain when you get stuck in traffic because that's just the result of it. It's a lower capacity system and it can't carry the same amount of people that, other public transport systems can. So, in the meantime, it's like if, these sort of systems that he's proposing just kind of detract from actual public transport investment. Especially in America, where politicians just can't even fathom of a train. It kind of comes back to, the sort of AM, FM, which is actual machines and fucking magic, which I quite like. But, a lot of the times, I think we think that how we want to sort of revolutionize something instead of just iterate on it and improve on it. And it kind of just hurts average people who would really benefit from just the AM solution to the problem. And, also the climate, like, I think there was recently a interview where the politician in the US said that 50% of the things we need to combat climate change haven't been invented yet. And it's like, okay, that sounds like a good strategy there. Like, I mean, look, technology is totally improved. Like, technology will help, but it doesn't change the laws of physics.
Yeah.
Like,
and it's incremental, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Like, no advance is ever, like, I think we have this idea of, like, the genius people who just invented, like, electricity, invented the light bulb. And it's like, I think that as we progress forwards, those things are becoming increasingly less common because back in the day, or back like 100 or 200 years ago, it was quite easy to stumble over something in your garage and just have it be like an invention. Just go in your shed and then discover that this thing makes light if you put electricity through it.
But also, the thing I'd say is, of a lot of those early ones, like, it wasn't like completely new.
Yeah.
It was trying to do something else. So like the light bulb is like a different way of like having a candle or something. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's kind of based on something else. I guess you can say the Vegas Loop is kind of based on Subway. I don't know if I'm actually making a good point here at all.
No, but I think it makes sense in that, like, as well, I think it's worth mentioning that these things, as much as we like to think of them as being a specific inventor, a lot of those inventors also had a giant team behind them, or had research assistants and stuff. There's generally very few times, like even Steve Jobs, right? Like everyone lords over Steve Jobs as sort of a genius and a visionary, and that he probably was. But first, Apple computers weren't a completely sort of different. This obviously the iPhone had a number of improvements over other phones, and it did do a lot of stuff, but it was ultimately still iterating on other sort of touchscreen form factor phones. Like there was
touchscreen technology before the iPhone, even though the iPhone definitely like revolutionized it, but like.
But it was sort of doing simple things like user interface and considering like user-based design. So it's like, what does the user need? Focusing on that primarily, and then building a system based on that. And I think that approach should be taken for transport, in that what does our ideal, perfect public transportation system look like? How do we want to move people around? And then let's come up with a strategy to build a system as close to that as possible.
Yeah.
So instead of focusing on what we can build, we should focus on what we should build, and then let that guide us into the process of trying to get as close to that as possible.
Yeah, definitely. That was beautiful, Josh.
Cheers. Thanks for joining.
To revolutionise transport.
I know you've got to go and watch Eurovision, so I've been trying to rattle through the slides quickly.
I'm just seeing it's 3 minutes past 8. Yeah. I'm like, oh no. But yeah. Are we doing a rating with this or not? Because it was kind of just talking more about the Vegas Loop.
Yeah, a bit of a bonus episode. I mean,
yeah,
what are your thoughts?
I'll say your plan for an underground train system, Josh, is very viable.
Really?
Yeah, I know. That's what I'm going with.
So 5 out of 5. 5 out of 5 for putting an underground train in.
I know it's a crazy new idea, but personally, I have to give it.
Look at this!
Wow, your drawing's amazing. It looks like a face in a way.
Yeah.
But
yeah. So putting a train in a tunnel, 5 out of 5. So
would do again.
What? So there's feasibility and practicality.
Yeah, it's all 5. Trains are 5 out of 5.
And then 5 out of 5 for practicality.
Yeah, it's pretty practical.
And what about coolness?
Oh, coolness, a 5 out of 5 as well. Actually, I guess it depends on the train, but yeah.
But not
for.
All. What's the most shit like train operator?
Loads of people talk to you about Northern, don't they? But I haven't really used
They've kind of
much.
improved.
Have they? Oh, okay.
Yeah. Coolness, but not for.
I don't like East Midlands that much. That's the one I've mainly gone on.
Yeah, there's a lot of crappy trains on that. They're getting new ones though.
I know. I always thought that they overcharged me.
But coolness, but not for those damn 80s dog boxes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. Is that it? Have we finished?
Yeah, that's it.
Cool.
That's it, I think.
Thank you for listening then, people.
Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed the episode.
Yeah. Hopefully you've learned about the new technology of pods.
Of rail-based pod trains.
Exactly. Oh.
Right. Okay. you go and watch.
Goodbye.
Thingy. Right.
How do
goodbye.
I leave?